Only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to make the ask for small community foundations. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure you're going to find the next hour jam-packed full of ideas and strategies and for things you need to think about when it comes to growing and building your assets as a community foundation. Next slide. So today's presenter, my name is Lindsay, and I'm the Director of Learning for Community Foundations of Canada, and I'll be moderating today's session. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker or presenter for today, Liz Palmieri. Liz is a familiar face to many of us in the Community Foundation movement in Canada because she was the first Executive Director of the Niagara Community Foundation starting in 2000. And over her tenure, has worked with an amazing group of volunteers and staff to grow that organization from its initial two $1,000 endowment funds to one which has granted over $8 million and raised more than $50 million in endowment funds. Since her retirement in 2016, she has worked as a consultant internationally, facilitating the development of strategic plans, providing board governance training, and offering workshops on fund development, risk management, and other subjects important to strengthen the voluntary sector. On a personal level, her small claim to fame is that she was a part of the Chorus Niagara flash mob that took place in November 2010 at the Seaway Mall in Welland, Ontario. And if you haven't seen it, you should try and find it because more than 50 million people from around the world have viewed it on YouTube, and it's quite entertaining. So I am really thrilled to have Liz join us. She's got a wealth of experience and really understands what it means to cultivate donors and grow your assets as a community foundation. So welcome, Liz. Next slide. So especially for those who are joining us on our webinars for the first time, we have everyone muted. So you can hear us, but we can't hear you. And that just ensures that we have the best quality of sound and avoid some outside noises. We are recording this webinar, and it will be made in our resource section and our resource library after today's presentation. And so if you want to share this with board members or other staff, you'll be able to access it. We do encourage you, for the best webinar experience, is to close all other applications and turn up your computer's volume so you can hear everything. Next slide. And in order for you to get the most out of this webinar, we do encourage you to have to access our question log in order to ask the questions that you would like Liz to address. Because we have everyone muted, this is the most effective way to do this. So throughout the presentation, please feel free to type in your question and send it on. And when we have an appropriate break, I will stop Liz and we'll throw out some questions to her. So please take advantage of that. Next slide. And I guess at this point now, Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Good afternoon, folks, or good morning if we're having people from BC. I have to tell you, it's actually glorious weather here in Niagara. We've had everything from not quite freezing, but it's very menopausal weather these days. And I'm really happy to be able to be presenting this webinar today to you across Canada. So this is actually a two-part webinar. The first part deals with some of the preparations that you need to do in order to do effective fund development for your small community foundations. And the second part takes place on November the 1st, and we'll delve into sort of how you actually start the process of asking and meeting with prospective donors. So today what we're going to cover is three subject areas. The first is confronting your fears about asking. We know that fund development for many is their least favorite job at the foundation. Ask for money? Yikes, give me any other job. You'll find out what you're afraid of and provide an overview on the factors critical to successful fund development to help you. Then we'll talk about overcoming your fears about asking. We'll confront your fears. Sounds a little bit like a segment on Dr. Phil's TV show. Then provide you with a better understanding that it doesn't take a rocket science to do fund development or a seasoned, experienced fundraiser. There is a process and the process works. And then we'll end off this session, but talking a little bit about how to ask without asking. This is just a worksheet that you'll create that will help you identify individuals that you can ask. But we'll get to a little bit more on this later. So we're going to do a poll. I want to see who's taking part in today's seminar. So the first question is, what is your role with the Community Foundation? Board, fund development, volunteer, or staff? So we'll do that poll now.
Okay, we can see that the results are up where we have a good number of staff here of community foundations, but I also think what's a really interesting number is the board members and volunteers who are participating, and only 4% of the people responding have a specific role around fund development. So, you know, a nice cross section, but really looking at the onus that many of us who are not in the fund development business are in this role of having to build and grow the assets of the community foundation. Okay, Liz?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Cindy. Now we got one more question to ask you. It's who's taking part in today's webinar? So how many years have you been involved with your community foundation? So if we could go to that second question now.
Wow. So the majority of the people responding have less than 5 years experience within the community foundation. So a lot of people new to this work.
So let's get back to the webinar. Thanks so much, Cindy, for sharing that with us here. So what is it about fund development that makes you reluctant to ask? Perhaps you could actually, in the chat section, you could put a few comments. But is it because you don't know who to ask? We're not like typical organizations raising a lot of money for large capital campaigns. Who we are looking to ask is perhaps maybe some of the more unlikely suspects. Is it because you don't know how to get the door open? And certainly in part 2 of the webinar, we'll spend some more time talking about that. Is it because you don't know much about the impact of your foundation in the community? And in this session, we'll show you how to learn about this. Is it because you don't know how to ask? We're going to share some tips on that. Is it because you don't know how to match the interests of a prospect with the needs of the foundation or the community? And our tips on research that we're going to cover in this session will help you on that. So as I said earlier, this session and part 2, which is taking place on November 1st, will provide you with tools and resources to give you confidence to make the ask. I don't know, Cindy, if anybody put anything in the chat box about other reasons what makes them reluctant to ask.
Yes, there is a comment here about, I feel bad asking for people to part with their hard-earned funds.
Okay, I'll make sure to hopefully through this session and the next one to help you not feel bad, but to feel passionate and glad.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else
there is another one around how to gauge philanthropic intent. So are we asking for too little money, too much money, you know, their particular interests?
Okay, so we'll get those. I would hope that by the end of both of these sessions, we'll be able to address both of those concerns. Anything else, Cindy?
Not at this point.
Okay, moving on to the next slide. There are many factors that are critical to overcoming your fears and give you confidence in this area. The first is research. Without solid research, your chances of success are limited. A pretty typical exercise of a fund development committee occurs when the chair says, give me the names of 5 people who we could ask for money. Now, over the next 2 months, I want you to go and take them out to lunch and ask them to open a fund at the foundation. Does this sound familiar? Well, starting perhaps with the 5 names is the right approach. But before you go any further, you need to find out more about the prospect, their family, where they worked, types of organizations that they support, who in your organization knows them, their interests, etc. What motivates them to get involved in the community or in causes. This is true whether we are talking about individuals or companies. Research on the prospect is critical to successful fund development. Spend some time learning about your community foundation. What is so special about your organization? What makes it unique? What impact have you had in the community? What's your history? Develop a fact sheet on accomplishments that can be part of your fund development toolkit. How do we celebrate our accomplishments? Do we have donor receptions? Do we have a newsletter? Is there special newspaper supplements? Do we send media releases? Spend a bit of time understanding current issues or concerns. Perhaps speak to your local social planning councils, your local arts council, or any other planning body. Relate the community issues to your prospects' interests. Research and knowledge is critical. And I know many organizations are doing vital signs. That's a great document that helps community organizations and the Community Foundation understand what are the key issues in a number of sectors across the country. I can remember a number of years ago, shortly after I started at the Niagara Community Foundation, I received a phone call from an accountant who was very familiar with the Hamilton Community Foundation and knew Niagara was formed, but I had not met him before. He had a client named Alice who lived in St. Catharines, and he wanted to talk to her about perhaps doing something through her estate with the Niagara Foundation. So he introduced me to Alice. I went over to her house. She was a wonderful woman, actually didn't live too far from my house. And we talked about what she was interested in supporting. And I had never met Alice before. And she talked about her interest in wanting to support children, which is very interesting because Alice had never married, but I think she might have been a retired school teacher. So she asked me what I knew about children's organizations in Niagara. Well, at that point, I knew, but I didn't know enough. So I said to her, I'd get back to her with a little bit of a report. And then I went back to the office, and we had something in Niagara called 211, or Niagara Information Center. So I went on their website, Googled, did a search on St. Catharines-based children's charities, and a whole whack of charities came up. But what I did was identified 5 charities that had a long and deep history in Niagara, and specifically St. Catharines. I did up a little report for her, probably a paragraph or 2 about each of them. And I called her back, dropped off the report, and she said basically, thank you very much. And that was actually the last that I heard from Alice. I connected with her accountant. He said she valued this information. And then I didn't hear any more from Alice until about 4 years later when we got a notification in the mail from her lawyer. And she, in fact, had taken word for word what I had suggested about the 5 charities. She gave money to each of the charities, and then she gave money to the Community Foundation to support our Children and Youth Fund. So that was really interesting because I didn't know at the time what the community needs and issues were. I didn't know Alice, but through the network, the accountant in Hamilton knew of us, and we made that connection that way. So I can't stress enough how important prospect research and understanding the needs and issues as they relate to the prospect are important going forward, and also understanding your community foundation, what's special about it, and how we promote our work.
Liz, can I jump in? Can you just get the mic a little bit closer? You're sounding a little bit muffled.
Oh, is this better? Is this better?
Oh, much better. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll just hold it right by my mouth here. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so this next slide is really about relationships. I can't stress enough the importance of having a relationship with a potential donor to the likelihood of successful fund development. And it doesn't need to be you, but it does need to be someone who knows the foundation and knows the donor. And sometimes it takes years between when the relationship with the foundation starts and when a gift is realized. And I can speak to this because in the last couple of weeks, the Niagara Foundation received a significant, our largest gift, and it came from the estate of one of our supporters. His name was Dave Howe. He was a volunteer with the Community Foundation in 2001 with our St. Catharines Fund. That fund would meet a couple of times a year. Dave always came. He was an entrepreneur, a sports guy, never married, but developed a relationship later in life with Suzanne. He was always interested in our work, asked great questions, would sponsor things, but never really made a gift. It's not for me wanted asking him. And the ask would be, Dave, is it time for you to consider doing something? He, in fact, set up a private foundation during this time, which we thought was odd, but that was okay. And then we created a new gift vehicle when all the Smart and Caring Fund promotion came, and we created a Smart and Caring Children and Youth Fund. We actually created about 5 of these different Smart and Caring Field of Interest funds, and I shared the information with Dave. And we got a phone call probably early in 2014 to say, Liz, okay, it's time, I want to do something. Met with him and his accountant. He made us a nice gift to open a fund. He didn't tell his partner he was doing it. And then a year later, he passed, which was pretty sad. But before I left, his estate was all going to the private foundation, and they connected with us because they didn't want to administer the foundation anymore, and they wanted to know what they could do in partnership with the Niagara Foundation. So we talked about a donor-advised fund, and this was in January of 2015. I have to think of this. Yeah, 16. And it took this long, so 2 weeks ago it was announced that the private foundation was ceasing to operate and everything was coming over to the Community Foundation for this wonderful fund that's going to be administered and owned by the Community Foundation. That's a relationship that took 15 years to develop. So don't be discouraged because all good things come to those who wait. So to get back to the whole notion about relationships, I'm reminded of a former board chair who called up their executive director about a prospect. In this case, it was a man who won a huge legal settlement. The chair wanted the ED to send a letter right away to the individual encouraging him to make a gift to the foundation. Bad idea. No relationship, no understanding of the prospect, no research. The person may have been a good prospect, but more work needed to be done before an ask could take place. What is it about your community foundation that gets you excited? What would get this person with whom someone has a relationship to say, wow, I didn't know that? It could be the flexibility of the donor funds. I often call us the brokers for philanthropy or the corner store for philanthropy. We have lots of products on our shelves. We just don't know what the client wants. And it's interesting, when the story about Dave's gift came out, it was front page of the local paper. But on the back page, coincidentally, our monthly ad promoting the whole concept of giving $50 a month to start your family fund was in the paper. So it really was great news for us because it let people know that certainly we welcome large gifts, but we also welcome gifts of any size. You need to understand what the impact is of your grant. So take some time to learn about successful grant stories and source out subjects that would be of interest to this particular person that you want to meet. Many foundations find opportunities for grant recipients to share their stories, either at board meetings, at donor receptions, in newsletters, in media releases. Talk to some of your donors. Find out what it was about the foundation that made them write the check. And then use this information to help to sell the foundation to others. At Niagara, for a number of years, we did a series of donor-hosted small receptions where they shared their story with a group of people, each of whom had a relationship with someone at the reception. It was kind of like peer-to-peer learning. So I'm just going to move to the next slide. Cindy, are there any questions that have come up?
Nothing at this point. Keep going.
Okay. So you need to be passionate about your community foundation. A former executive director at the Hamilton Community Foundation created a document called The Wow Factor. It's a great two-pager that features the benefits of community foundation and ties them into our business, whether it's donor services, grant making, promoting philanthropy, or community leadership. I'm just going to read a few of these, and then at the end of the seminar, or the webinar, I should say, we're going to email this to all the participants. So in terms of the whole notion of promoting philanthropy, gift generation benefits, what are the wows around it? Well, from a donor's perspective, all gifts are welcome, large and small. Everyone can participate, be a philanthropist. And also from a donor's perspective, you have so much flexibility in the purpose and how the gifts can be used according to the donor wishes. And benefits for the community from the foundation's perspective is we bring new resources into the public domain. We can make funds of availability of funds for immediate or emerging needs, and we can work with and strengthen local charities, not compete with them. In terms of some of the donor services that are WOWs that Foundation offers, we focus on facilitating the donor's goals, not the Foundation's goals. We can help them with the design of personal giving or granting strategies, and we have the ability to accept a variety of gifts and offer flexible funding options. In terms of the grant-making WOWs, we have knowledge and expertise and community networks, more than what many donors have. We can see the big picture, we can connect sectors and take the long view. We are accessible, open, fair, and have objective practices. And we have the ability to link grant-making with donors' interests. In terms of some of the community leadership WOWs, well, certainly for those of you that do vital signs, that's a fabulous document. Many community foundations are convening community discussions as a result of an issue that's arisen in the community or what's in vital signs. And we provide support for diverse and broad community participation as volunteers, advisors, donors, and partners. Certainly the investment management and financial stewardship WOWs are we have expert portfolio management with professional counsel. We have a record of above average growth and returns. We are committed to accountability and public reporting. And we have the opportunity for other charities to participate in endowment building for their future sustainability. Other ways that you can certainly learn about great grants is inviting grant beneficiaries to each board meeting. At Niagara, the first 10 or 15 minutes was always a grant beneficiary coming and talking about their particular program. And what's interesting, people learn in different ways. They can read it in the annual report, but actually to hear firsthand from a grant beneficiary and to ask them questions, it just makes it much more tangible. Attending check presentations and learning about the organization, join the grants committee, and help to do assessments. One of the things that we also did at Niagara is we gave each board member 6 annual reports, and we asked them to share them with their friends and associates. These documents help to celebrate our work, have wonderful donor stories, and great grant stories. The other thing is really to develop good listening skills, and I think anybody that's married could probably really pay attention to this slide. At the Quebec City Conference a number of years ago, Diane Lister presented a workshop on fund development, which included a segment on active listening. If we are only focused on trying to get out the Community Foundation message and not listening to what the speaker has to say, we will miss opportunities to cultivate a potential donor. And I can't stress enough for you the importance of letting the speaker speak. It will help you better understand their interests. I'm just going to share with you a story about when I perhaps didn't listen as well as I should have, and maybe I can show you how I should have listened. So a number of years ago, I visited a woman named June. June I had known not closely, but certainly enough that if I saw her in the community, we would have a conversation. She was the chief librarian. I used to own a bookstore years ago, so she was one of our customers. I served on the library board, so we always had a nice chat whenever I saw her in the community. And I thought that June would be a likely prospect because she was single, she was retired, she lived in a very, very well-appointed condo, and she was interested in the arts and literacy issues. So I called her up to have a cup of tea with her, and also just to share with her about the Community Foundation because she had expressed interest whenever I saw her. So we talked a little bit about the Community Foundation, and then I asked her if she would be interested in opening an endowment fund at the Community Foundation to support arts and culture or literacy. This was early in my tenure, I have to tell you, so I learned a lot from this. She said no, and it was very interesting because I said, okay, I understand. We chatted a little bit more, and I said, thank you. And I asked her if it was okay to send annual reports, and she said yes. And then I left, and I was kind of like embarrassed. I come from, I'm the middle child in an Anglo family. I've married an Italian. He usually does all of the asking when it's time to buy a car. And I do not like to ask people for money. But this was early on, and I thought I was doing the right thing. Okay, so here's what I did wrong and what I've learned about doing throughout my career is I asked too soon and I didn't listen. So this is what June said to me as why she said no. She said, my money is all tied up in stocks and bonds, my pension fund, and some RIFs, registered retirement income funds. I rely a lot on the advice of my financial advisor before I make a commitment of any significance. I'm also worried about my health and the unexpected costs I'll face in the future. That's almost word for word what she said to me about why she would not do something now. So maybe this is what I should have said, is perhaps we should meet next time with your advisor and we could talk about how you could set up a fund through your estate. This is exactly what she did, and I have to tell you, I can't remember if I did a follow-up with her. I don't have access to my notes from the Community Foundation anymore, but certainly when June passed, she did make a gift to the Community Foundation. I think it's a gift that generally supports charities in St. Catharines, but I should have done more homework. I should have listened. As it says on the slide here, I should have become an active listener. I should have given her feedback so I understood what she was saying. This would have established certainly a framework of respectful listening, and it encouraged the speaker to keep talking. Turns out that I knew her advisor. He was also a good supporter of the foundation, so it all worked out for the best, but it could have worked out actually not at all. I just lost my screen. 1 second here, sorry. So, to be successful in helping you to overcome some of your fears is research. Research on your community foundation, research on your donors, research on the grants that you offer, research on ways in which the community foundation tells its story. And I know that one slide that I talked about all the things that you need to do. You don't need to do lots, but you need to do whatever makes the most sense for the person with whom you would like to talk to about the Community Foundation. Find out a little bit about what their interests are, find a grant story that might align with them, or find another donor who's done something similar to what their interest may be. Relationship is so key to getting the door open. And it doesn't, as I said, have to be you that has the relationship. It could be somebody that you know that knows that person that has the relationship. But it's virtually impossible to do this cold, to call up people cold. It becomes too impersonal. It requires passion. You volunteered with your community foundation because of your passion for the work that your foundation is doing, you need to share that passion, and you need to listen. You need to listen to what your prospect is saying or the individual is saying. And if you don't have the answer at the time, let them know that you'll get back to them with an answer. But you really need to listen so that it's not about what you and your foundation wants to do, but it's how you can help to facilitate that individual's wishes and interests in supporting the community through your community foundation. Now, our objective with this first workshop was to have you understand that in order to be successful, that there is a process that must be followed, and there's a lot of homework that must be done. And understanding what's required should help you to overcome some of those fears that I just shared with you in this seminar so far. Cindy, have any questions come up?
One is just a comment, and it says that you're so right about asking people questions to ensure we tailor the pitch to the person's needs. We have so many tools as community foundations to facilitate philanthropy. We can't just guess what they want or give them a laundry list of services. And I think that's so true, because we, as this individual says, we have so many tools, and I think sometimes a mistake is that we try to dump all the information out to them and say, oh, we can do this, if you're interested in that, and really muddying the waters and not having time for some reflective thinking or conversation in terms of what the donor is interested in doing, or planting only seeds to generate the right conversation.
I'm nodding my head because I can remember shortly after we started, it was probably, so we started in November of 2000. And in the spring of 2001, I went on a visit with one of my board members to a local funeral home, because he had heard, this was in Niagara Falls, he had heard what a funeral home was doing in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that at the time. Ernie had just arranged for me to meet with the funeral home director. So, of course, I took my community foundation kit. And Cindy will remember this kit, or maybe even Jane Humphreys will remember this kit, because at times it was used as a good example. I had a page on everything. Page on donor advised funds, community funds, field of interest funds, how to make a gift, your RSPs, your will. There must have been about 20 pages. All in this kit. And I was prepared to leave it with the funeral home director. And we were sitting there, Eugene and I, talking to Ernie on the couch. And I'm thinking, what was I thinking about bringing all of this information? All he was looking for was to set up a donor advised fund. What they ended up doing was giving a certain amount of money from each service to the fund, and then quarterly we would receive a check. He wasn't interested in all this other stuff, excuse me, just in what donor advised funds. So it's really, now when we make a visit, or when I made the visit, all I would take would be the annual report and just a simple brochure that we had that talked about the different ways in which donors could make a contribution, or that we work with donors. And those two documents were the only documents that I took to the first visit. And it wasn't until the second, or maybe even the third visit, that I would come with more detailed information. So it was a really great learning exercise about overwhelming donors, because we do have, in some ways, we're so schizophrenic, because donors see us through the lens that we have that relationship with them. And I think I have time for one more story here. Again, shortly after we started, one of our board members, adult child, passed away. She was very involved in the community. She was a CEO of the local food bank, and was a founding board member of the Community Foundation here in Niagara. And a few days after Stephen passed, her other son, they were at the family talking about what they could do to memorialize Stephen's life. And her son said, Mom, in Toronto, they have this thing called the Toronto Community Foundation. You could set up a fund with there. Well, you can imagine Betty Lou's surprise, saying, okay, honey, I'm on the Niagara Community Foundation. Maybe we should be doing something here in Niagara. She knew that we did these funds, but it wasn't until she was faced with a personal situation that she knew that we were the place for her. And so many of our donors, and I would think so many of your donors, only know us through the lens that they have that relationship with us. So they may have set up a scholarship fund. They may think that's all we do. They may have set up a camp fund. They may think that's all we do and don't know the breadth and scope. So even when they share their story about what we do, they in fact only know about 5 or 10%. So it's a great opportunity and a great challenge. We have, as I said, so many of these products and services that we offer. The challenge is to align them with what the donors' interests are at the right time in the donor's life. Mm-hmm. So what I want you to do right now is...
Liz, before we get into that, there is a question here. And okay. So for those community foundations that are in rural areas or areas where there are a lot of second homeowners, right? Vacation homes. Yes. Any suggestions for research or building the relationship to the community foundation and to the needs of the community? Because, you know, these are people of significant wealth in most cases, and they raise their family at these second homes, but they don't necessarily relate to local immediate needs, even though, you know, they probably use the hospital. They might put their kids in summer camp programs, you know, a number of things.
Okay, so in Niagara, we have two communities like that. We have in Fort Erie, so on the north shore of Fort Erie, just in Canada, but just north of Buffalo, a lot of folks from the States bought summer properties along the north shore of Fort Erie. And then we have Niagara-on-the-Lake, where there are a lot of people who have retired to Niagara-on-the-Lake. I wish I could say that I have the answer for this. We were never able to ever find a way to connect with these organizations. But I must say the local hospital was able to do so because that was the local impact. All I could suggest is perhaps working with the local hospital about having them, because some hospitals are not interested in managing endowments, and I know they're just looking about money for equipment, but maybe there is a way to partner with the local hospital about setting up an endowment fund and doing sort of a joint appeal or approach to some of their donors who are folks who come from away and have a second home to support a hospital endowment fund that's held by the local community foundation. We know that the United Way has had great success in these communities because they're about immediate needs, but we didn't have a lot of success, but maybe partnering with a local charity that is having some immediate needs might be a way to do this.
Yeah, and you know, those are good suggestions. And I know in Ontario in particular, they've had, some foundations have had success working through their local Cottagers Association. You know, often they'll put a newsletter out, so there might be a story in there from someone who is a long-standing cottager that has contributed to the community foundation and why they why they're involved with the organization, or that they work with the local Cottagers Association to do a summer cocktail party or something like this, and or that donor would host it, and as a way of introducing the community foundation to other cottagers. It is a tough strategy, and I know there's another community foundation in Northern Ontario where a good number of their cottagers live in Toronto, and so they actually host an event in Toronto and bring those people together. And so looking at who are their donors from Toronto, invite them and have them bring friends that they know that summer in those areas. So, but I think you're quite right. It is a bit of a long game for those kind of gifts. And another comment is from someone says, I often don't bring anything. Then the next meeting is guaranteed because I need to meet with them to present their customized package. And whoever this person is, I can't see the name, says, say hi to her for me.
Hi.
I also want to go back to one story you were talking about where the individual, the woman who you thought might be interested in starting an endowment fund, and then afterwards you realize you should have connected with her financial advisor and so on. In one experience I had when I was with the Guelph Community Foundation was that a lawyer who worked with us very closely called me up and said, I have a client, you need to go see her. You know, she's updating her will. We need to, you know, she needs to make some charitable contributions. So, and, you know, this again was early in my game. And so off I scurried, and this individual had such an impressive art collection. We talked a lot about it. And but her concerns were very similar to your donor, where she was worried about having enough income to live on. She was worried about where her art collection was going. She was not interested in us at this point in time. And, you know, I didn't do my due diligence in saying to the lawyer, well, you know, what was the conversation like? You know, is this really the right time? Maybe we need to do, you know, some preliminary steps first. So
but that certainly talks about the importance of relationships, because we used to track where all our gifts come from. And it was amazing how many, I mean, when I first started, we focused our communication mainly on professional advisors and letting them know about how we worked. We did receptions, we did lunch and learns. We actually did a series of after work wine and cheese. After work food works really well. And we would invite a law firm, an accounting firm, an investment firm, and an insurance firm. So, because then it's a bit about building their relationships amongst them, but to talk about the community foundation. And the professional advisor promotion and communication was primary, and I think it continues to be primary, because they're the folks that have the relationships. And if you can have a relationship with those teams, they in turn can help to share your story. So yeah, it's all, as I said, it's all about those relationships. And even in a little community of, you know, 15,000, you have a good relationship with the person that does most of the wills in that community. It's fascinating how that can pay off in the long term. And they understand about conflict of interest, but it's just a real, at least they're aware of what you are doing, and when the opportunity makes sense, that they will at least let people know about your organization.
Okay. So Liz, I'll let you go on to the next thing. There is another question, but I think we need to move on to your worksheet.
Okay.
Right now.
So
we've got 15 minutes left.
Okay. So what I want you to do right now is on a piece of paper, or open a screen on your computer. No, I can't do that. Just on a piece of paper for now, is identify one prospect with whom you or someone you know has a relationship. It could be your lawyer, it could be an accountant, it could be somebody on in your bridge club, could be somebody on a team, sports team. Just and it doesn't have to be a person that you think has a lot of money. Just somebody that you have a relationship with. So I'm going to just take a few minutes or seconds to write down that name. So now I want you to name one thing about your foundation that you are very proud of or that excites you. Could be a grant, could be a great donor story, could be about vital signs. Just make a quick note about what that is. Then identify one opportunity where you could let the prospect know about the foundation. Could be taking them out for coffee, over a game of golf, dinner, just an event that's taking place at the foundation. And then what is one thing you know about this prospect that would be helpful in fund development? It could be you know that they're very interested in children, that they are interested in the environment, in culture. So what we're doing here is just starting the process of building a profile and an opportunity to make the first ask in your fund development process. It's a little bit of a tease. This actually is a formal worksheet. It's just a little one-page document. We're going to send it to you after today's session. At the end of part 2, you will have actually 3 prospects, 3 opportunities, 3 things about the foundation that excites you. And it's interesting, it could be the same thing about the foundation that excites you. In Niagara, we tell our boards, we ask our boards that they have to connect with 6 people a year. We have a big breakfast once a year where we invite a speaker or do the launch of our Vital Signs-like report. And it's great because it's a breakfast, not expensive, so board members will invite their 6 people to breakfast. So it's a great opportunity to hear the foundation story, they get the annual report, and then the board member does just a little bit of a follow-up. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about how to do the asking. That's kind of like the teaser for next session. But what I've left you with now is just the beginning of starting to build the fund development worksheet. I'm skipping over this next slide because this is what we're actually going to cover in the next session. Develop strategies on how to ask, what to ask for, and how to handle resistance. Once you've asked, to let the prospect speak, and the importance of follow-up once asked, and to know when to stop asking. So this is all going to be covered in the next session. So I'm going to hand it back to Cindy to see if there's any questions and to let you know about some of the upcoming webinars.
Yes, thanks, Liz. A couple of questions here. One is, our community foundation just received a donation from a family foundation that was unexpected, which is great. I wanted to follow up and educate them more on what we do. Have you had success asking other family foundations to create a fund or possibly transfer their funds?
Did you hear that laugh?
Yes.
We thought that this was a strategy. So, you know, in year 2 or 3, we looked up all the private family foundations in Niagara. And you know how hard it is to connect with family foundations, private foundations. We spoke with a few. Nothing has happened. Because I think what it is the person who set up that family foundation actually loves to do the administrative work. And so when we kept saying, you know, we can get rid of that administrative burden, they still were not interested. And I think it's only, so in Dave's case, the second generation, Dave was interested in, you know, doing the disbursements during his lifetime. The second generation was not. So perhaps what's good is just to keep that relationship there, letting them know what the options are when they are not interested or able to continue, and have a couple of stories about how Hamilton had a great example of a family foundation that closed. Niagara now has a great example. We know in the Branscombe Family Foundation, if that ever ceases to exist, that will transfer over to us, but they're already on the 1 to 3rd generation, so that's probably not going to happen. But just to keep the relationship sort of at a very low-key level until it happens, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, it really is a matter of timing. Another question about, how do you specifically engage board members to get involved in making the ask and reaching out to a donor which they have a relationship with?
You'll have to attend part 2 to find out how. Sorry about
okay.
That.
No, that's
right. Wait a sec, but I'll tell you a quick little story. So one of my board members was so shy about doing this, and we said to her, just take a friend out to coffee. Practice on a girlfriend or and it was one of her female friends, and she told her that she was just practicing on her, and she said at the end of it, it felt great because she didn't feel intimidated because she was sharing her experience with a really close friend and letting them know that this was something that she was going to have to do a little bit more on. And she turned out to be one of our great ambassadors. She knew the mayor of Niagara Falls. They have this annual, it's called Sleep Cheap Charities Reap, where the hotels for 3 nights on the shoulder season midweek offer rooms really cheap. And that fund, you know, the community foundation ended up getting 50% of the proceeds when that first started, and over the number of years built up to over $1 million fund. And it's because our board member was a hotel owner who was part of this, who knew the mayor, who wasn't the mayor at the time. And we took him to lunch and he said, well, this makes a lot of sense. But it's just giving them goals and also having other board members share stories at a board meeting on what they've done, because then it helps them identify other ways that they can do it.
Right. One final question before we wrap up is, we have local communities as neighbors who do not have businesses or many services but live outside our foundation's geographic border. how do we encourage them to give to us as they don't have their own foundation to give through, if it helps to aid their residents who use our facilities? So beyond maybe just redrafting your geographic area that you cover, what are ways that you could reach out to those individuals and families?
So we do have, in Niagara, we do have donors who their money doesn't stay in Niagara. It goes outside of Niagara. And I think it's, when you identify those individuals, because you are really focused on the donor, it's just letting them know that they have discretion on where their funds can go. They can stay in their hometown. They can go to outside of their hometown. I mean, we had gifts that were going to some international charities that had that were registered in Canada. So it's just promoting that whole wow thing about it's really focused on what that individual wants to do, and your community foundation is just a vehicle to help them.
That's right. Okay. All right. So just to wrap up here then, if there aren't any other questions, I just wanted to bring to your attention our upcoming webinars. So that one on the 26th of October, so that's just next week, about how the cloud can help community foundations. This is coming to you via Amazon Web Services, and they're doing some really interesting work with community foundations and other public foundations, both in Canada and the US. And I think if you're trying to think about your systems and storage of data and information, this would be a really good one to participate in. On October 30th, we're kicking off our first of our board governance fireside chats featuring Vicki Grant, who is the board chair of Community Foundations of Canada. This will be done as a pre-recorded webinar, and so it'll just be made available on the 30th, and you can listen to it at any point in time. On November 1st, stay tuned, the second part of Making the Ask with Liz Palmieri. And if you are unable to participate in that one, it will be recorded and you'll be able to access it on our website. And then on November 21st, we have Anne Braley from the Toronto Foundation, and up until recently has been the VP of Philanthropic Services at the Toronto Foundation, and will be leading a session on cultivating lifelong donor relations. So that very important stewardship piece that so many of us find a hard time getting to on a day-to-day basis. And so those are all great webinars, I think, that we have lined up for you this fall. And I don't think there's any other questions at this point in time. Do you want to just head to the next slide?
Oh, sorry, I was just listening to you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yep. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Liz. Our contact information is there. I do want to mention that CFC is in the process of updating a lot of its fund development resource tools, and these will be hopefully up sometime in November. We're just going through final drafts, and many of them have been prepared and reviewed by Anne Braley, so lots of expertise there. So stay tuned for that, but do feel free to reach out to us.
Cindy, can I just say one more thing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if, for those that are listening, if they know that there are other volunteers or staff at their foundations who are going to be listening to the November 1st session, but didn't listen to today's, I think it would be really helpful for them to go online in a few days when this webinar is posted to listen to this webinar before they take the next one.
Right. Okay, great. All right, so no other questions at this point, I don't think, and so thank you so much, Liz, for taking your time and sharing your expertise and knowledge. There's lots of good fodder in here for you to think about. I think the bottom line is these don't need to be scary opportunities for us. I think they're more about what we're really good at, and that is one-on-one relationships and just having really thoughtful conversations and doing some prep work ahead of time and doing that due diligence before we go out. And take every opportunity to do this and learn from every opportunity, because it's a constantly moving target when it comes to donor engagement.
Right.
So, right, as we know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But thank you so much. It's been really great to be doing this, and I look forward to sharing the November 1st session as well.
Okay, thanks so much, folks, for taking the time out of your busy days, and thanks, Liz.